Brama Grodzka Teatra NN, or the Grodzka Gate NN Theater Center, is a municipal institution staffed entirely by non-Jews, which is committed to the remembrance of Lublin's Jewish community. This remembrance is accomplished through theater, storytelling, genealogy, online activities, collecting photographs, recording oral histories, educational seminars, academic conferences, publishing, and participatory commemorations using the city space, which are called mysteries.
Bridge to Poland kind of came, it was kind of a serendipitous thing. I didn't feel a connection to Poland, and if my mother hadn't invited me to come here in 2005 when she was going on a book tour, when her memoir Dry Tears was translated into Polish, I don't know if I would have come here. It wasn't that on that first trip in 2005 that I was looking for my personal connections. I was just so amazed at the warm welcome that we got from people. I was still struck by the fact that there were these non-Jewish people commemorating Jewish life. They care about all the 43,000 Jews of pre-war Lublin. That meant ultimately that they also cared about my grandmother's sisters. That installation that Tomek conceived of, 43,000 folders, means that he cares and he feels like it's so important that there's a place for each one of those 43,000 people. And not only that, but there's a place for the whole community. They're commemorating that also, the loss of Lublin's Jewish community.
I think it's even bigger than Polish-Jewish relationships, than finding one nation's identity or two nations' identity. It's much bigger, and it became like this because of the times we are living in right now. Because I think now is the time when people are thinking again about who they really are. What is their own nationality? What are things that they are proud of, and what are the things that they don't want to remember? In this context, there is Bridge to Poland. One small organization with one person in it that wants to construct a bridge between great ocean, between nations that have a lot of good and bad relations, but a lot of common history. So trying this, it's a kind of utopia. But again, it's very real. Because if just one person is doing that, we have this one small stream to find new relations between people in Poland and Jews, between Christians and Jews, but also we have this one example of good relationships, of understanding, of trying to find a way to fight with difficulties, not with humans. And this is what's, for me, very important in Bridge to Poland.
The first people who inspired me in Poland, who are rescuers of memory, are Tomek and Vitek at Brama Grodzka. But since meeting them, I found out about other people in Poland who are doing this work of what I call rescuing memory. I was so moved by what Tomek and Vitek were doing because they were remembering the Jews of Lublin, but they were doing it in this amazing way, you know, often through art. You know, a lot of the ways that they do things are through these kind of rituals and what they call mysteries, but the mysteries, it's kind of based on this medieval way of doing like a kind of play out in the community, you know, turning off the lights, turning on the lights, you know, having the people gather in a public space, holding candles, you know. You could call it an event, you could call it a ritual, you might call it theater, you know. In these ways that can touch you emotionally because they're using art and they're using symbols, and it's not just like a dry museum kind of way of teaching history where it's just, you know, a paragraph explaining that something happened in a certain year and then a photograph or an artifact. No, it's a different way into history that I have found that for me was very moving, and I found for people that come here and participate that it's very moving. And you can see that the people who work here, because they don't get paid a lot of money, it's not like some Fortune 500 company or something. They're really dedicated to what they're doing, and they really have a lot of passion for it, and they care about it. But so as I've been coming, I've realized this is probably the strongest example in Poland of this rescue of memory, but there are so many examples all over the place where people are doing this. They take it upon themselves. Maybe they're cleaning up a cemetery in their ancestral town. You know, maybe they work in a Jewish museum. Maybe they're a teacher and they're teaching their students like about the Jewish history of the town. And sometimes it comes with a lot of pushback from people in the town and criticism and you know, people like maybe the mayor or other people in the town like are against it and they don't like it. And so I really admire these people who devote their lives to this, and I decided that it was important to create an archive of conversations with them because I'm curious about like why they're doing this, what motivated them to do this. My mother is not only a Holocaust survivor but also a Holocaust scholar, and her field is rescue and resistance. So she has studied the motivations of rescuers in Poland, like what motivated people to rescue Jews during the war. So I see my focus as kind of a second generation of hers, like studying the rescuers of memory. We heard earlier today, Tomek and I've heard other rescuers of memory talking about how first the Jews were murdered in reality, like the actual human beings, but then the memory was murdered. It was like kind of a double thing. So we had that, and then we also had sort of in parallel the rescuers of the lives, and now we have the rescuers of the memory. Of course, the rescuers of the memory are not risking their lives to do it. I don't want to like, you know, bring the analogy like to some crazy extreme, but I still think these people are, to me, they're fascinating, and they're also like really to be admired. And I feel like it's really important to have this archive of conversations with them, because the people who are teaching about Jewish life in Poland, Holocaust, but also pre-war Jewish life, will not be people who have had first-hand relationships with survivors. You know, the survivors are almost gone.
Members of the Grodzka Gate, such as the director Tomek Pietraszewicz, have met survivors and have made it their mission to preserve their testimonies while these people are still alive, to create a sort of living art through metaphor.
Metafory, które ja używam do określenia tego, co robimy, są dla mnie bardzo ważne, bo pokazują jakby mój stan świadomości wobec tego problemu, z którym tu się mierzymy. Ta metafora, na którą zwróciłaś uwagę, brama jako miejsce spotkania, czy też brama jako miejsce rozdzielające miasto żydowskie i chrześcijańskie jest właśnie taką pierwszą metaforą. Metafora, która jest już bliższa temu mojemu rozumieniu do teraz bramy, która jest jakby ma taką siłę, bym powiedział, sprawczą. To jest metafora bramy jako archipamięci, jako archiwum, jako miejsce, które ma przenieść pamięć o mieście żydowskim w przyszłość, ocalić tą pamięć. To powiedziałem, że ta metafora bramy jako archiwum miała taką sprawczą moc, ponieważ postanowiłem zmienić przestrzeń bramy w archiwum. Ale archiwum jest jednak rodzajem archipamięci. Jest taką kapsułą czasu. Natomiast czymś najbardziej takim fundamentalnym, jeżeli chodzi o rozumienie bramy dla mnie, to jest spojrzenie na to miejsce jako miejsce takiego zderzenia dwóch utopii. Jedna utopia wyrastająca z takiego jądra zła, ciemności, i druga wyrastająca ze światła. Wiele lat zajęło mi zrozumienie tego, że w zagładzie nie chodziło tylko o zabicie Żydów. Chodziło też o zabranie pamięci o nich, pozbawienie ich nazwisk, imion, historii. To jest właśnie to, co Niemcy chcieli zrobić. To jest właśnie ta ciemna utopia, że można to zrobić, że można ludzi pozbawić ich historii, pamięci, że doprowadzić do sytuacji, w której tak jakby ich w ogóle nie było na świecie. I z drugiej strony, żeby dać sobie z tym radę, to co można? Można przeciwstawić tej ciemnej utopii jasną utopię. Wiarę, że można jednak ocalić nazwiska, że można ocalić pamięć, że można znaleźć jakieś okruchy losów ludzi, którzy tutaj żyli. I to jest ta jasna utopia. Wiara, że jest to możliwe, że oddać tym ludziom, którzy tu są, którzy zostali tutaj w ziemi, w popiołach, właśnie tą pamięć o nich. No bo tak naprawdę te historie trafiały do bramy grodzkiej jak do takiej ochronki, do sierocińca, w którym ktoś jest, kto się nimi zaopiekował. Wcześniej nikogo to nie interesowało. One gdzieś były, ale też ich nie było. To jest też taka bardzo dla mnie osobista metafora. Ona nie jest taką techniczną metaforą, bo mnie osobiście bardzo mocno dotyka. Ona nie tylko tłumaczy, ale dotyka mnie osobiście. I to, że szukam. I to jest to rodzaj misterium takiego, mojego własnego misterium. Zanurzanie się w te historie i szukanie ich.
These artistic metaphors create a foundation for Brama Grodzka to heal Jewish-Polish relations using empathy.
It's so important to don't forget about those simple relations that we have, especially now when we are thinking that we are more connected, but we have maybe more connections, but still those connections are weaker. And looking into other people's faces is like kind of forgotten sometimes. And in Bridge to Poland, when you are going here with groups, those groups are constantly talking, discussing with other people, trying to understand their angle, their understanding of the world. This is very important. Also, you focus so much on positive things. And this positive utopia, this hope that we can give people is very important. We've been discussing a lot of difficult issues together. And what I really appreciate in those discussions is that we weren't afraid of those difficulties. We weren't afraid of what's bad happening in this world. Being against, it's so important right now in the world. When I came to Brama, I knew almost nothing about those relations.
Ale ja też byłem taki. Ja też tego nie widziałem bardzo długo. Miałem to szczęście, że spotkałem bramę grodzką. Jakby brama grodzka otworzyła mi oczy na to wszystko. Ja też przychodzę z takiego świata, w którym nie pamiętało się o Żydach. W ogóle nie rozmawiało się. Czy też nawet nie wiedziało się. To jest taka moja historia. Kogoś, kto dochodził do tej pamięci. Pamiętam ten moment, kiedy ja zacząłem dowiadywać się o tym, że tu żyli Żydzi, że właściwie nie ma żadnych informacji o nich. W Muzeum Historii Miasta Lublina nie ma informacji, że oni byli mieszkańcami tego miasta. I to było dla mnie takie poruszające. Jak to możliwe jest, że dorosły człowiek nie wie o czymś takim?
In their commitment to commemorating Jewish life, the non-Jewish employees of Brama Grodzka are agreeing to understand people unlike themselves.
It's very comfortable for people to stay in their bubbles. And this is what I think sometimes painful. Because it's looking on the past without understanding of today. It's easier, I think, to stay with your people, however you will define your people. But it's easier to stay like this. You don't have to think what those other people are thinking. You know, I remember we've been recording interview here once, and we've been talking about that people in Poland are living on the graves. And I've been thinking about it a lot after this. And I don't want to think about myself only in that perspective. It's painful to think only in that one perspective. Because where is my life in that? Because of all this pain and because of all what happened here, my life doesn't matter. And this is what's the most painful in that. And still, I understand the suffering here. So, for me, I'm thinking with projects. I'm thinking with future. I just want someone to find a way to find a story that will be common for me and for you and for other people who are in a situation like us, that will help us to have our own lives and to understand the suffering of people. I don't have my own identity. So much happened in my roots, and still, like, I know that there was not as much suffering in my roots as in any Jewish roots of people who've been living here. And I'm trying to create my own identity with who I am looking at the past. I think this is very difficult. And I'm seeing people who are trying to find even the smallest things about their past. A lot of Jewish people are trying to do that. Because they've lost so much, they are trying to regain even a little thing. In our Polish identity, I don't think we have something like this.
Despite the passing of many years, strained relationships between Poles and Jews continue, as negative attitudes within Polish-Jewish relations still exist.
anti-Polish sentiments are really, really strong. I read them a lot on Facebook, and they come out of tremendous pain and tremendous loss. I understand where they came from, but I really want to try to fight against them. Now, some people, because it doesn't make sense to say that a whole people is anything, right? It doesn't make sense to say that a whole nation is vile. It doesn't make sense to say that the whole Polish nation is one thing any more than it makes sense to say the whole Jewish nation is one thing. It just, I mean, just intellectually, how could it be?
We've been for as long time those people who don't matter, like for other nations, for people, like we felt abandoned for a lot of time of our history, and trying to find this identity, like what does it mean to be proud of being Polish? What I am proud of when I'm being Polish? And you know, it's been a long time here in Poland. Like we didn't have country, or like Jewish people, right? But we've been living here for centuries without our own identity. After war, we didn't want to, but we had to stay in this communist bloc because someone else decided for us. And it was painful for people. They didn't feel proud about themselves.
But it always helps to have these personal connections with people. So what I try to show people is not just something specific, but more general things, like we talk about reconciliation and forgiveness and who has the right to remember, who has the responsibility to remember, like, and they are meeting individuals. So, you know, I make a real point about introducing people to people so they get to have conversations and with these people who like want to have conversations with them.
The workers at the Grodzka Gate cultivate empathy within their work to better understand the complexity of Polish-Jewish relationships.
I really would like to offer the experience of what I've created for a Bridge to Poland trip to anybody. I don't want people to think that you have to be Jewish to come. There are all these like it's like one woman also said, you know, she said we were laughing, we were crying, you know, there are different elements to the trip. It's, of course, the story of Polish Jews ultimately is a tragic one. 90% of them were murdered. But we want to remember the life before, which was a rich life of many, many centuries. And you have to learn that history if you're going to understand why the death was so tragic. You can't just go to death camps, because it's not going to mean anything to you if you don't understand who these people were and what a rich life they had. Like, so that whole like rich cultural tapestry is important to convey to people so they understand that, you know, it was like there were so many Jewish newspapers in Poland, in Yiddish, in Polish. So, and then I want to show people Jewish life now in Poland. Like, what is contemporary Jewish life like in Poland? That's also really important, because there is Jewish life in Poland. It's like very small compared to what it was, but it exists. And of course that, as I said, but I'll say it again, the emphasis on the non-Jews commemorating Jewish life. So all of that, I think, can appeal to, you know, a wide swath of people. So, of course, when you go to visit Auschwitz or Majdanek, that's not going to be an uplifting experience. But when you go to, for example, there's this place called Chmielnik, where there's a renovated synagogue, and One man says, if you watch a video on my website, he says, you know, I experienced not only the pain of what was during the Holocaust, but also the joy of life before. And he said that right after we had gone to that place, because you can listen to testimonies about pre-war Jewish life in that museum, and you can hear people talking about what was it like in the market, what was it like in school.
Leora has become a model for healthy Jewish and Polish relationships through her partnership with Broma Grodzka. The director, Tomek, states,
no i oczywiście nie mamy lepszego ambasadora jak Leora po prostu. To jest coś niesamowitego, że ta idea Bramy Grodzkiej, miejsca spotkania, dialogu polsko-żydowskiego. I to nie chodzi tylko o Lublin, o Bramę Grodzką, bo ona jest właściwie takim pięknym przykładem kogoś, kto właśnie tworzy ten most, ten dialog. I absolutnie jestem przekonany, że w ogóle w innym miejscu byłyby te relacje polsko-żydowskie, gdyby było więcej takich osób jak Leora.